On December 25, 2023, the body of young Richard Harris was found in a huge fuel storage facility on the outskirts of Oakdale, a small Midwestern town of just over 15,000 souls. The grim discovery brought a tragic end to a 6-month mystery that had gripped the community and shattered its illusion of small-town tranquility. The morning had dawned cold and gray, a light dusting of snow covering the ground, promising a white Christmas for Oakdale's residents. But for Joe Sanderson, a maintenance worker at the old Oakdale Fuel Storage Facility, the holiday cheer was about to be brutally dispelled. At approximately 7:15 a.m., Sanderson arrived at the facility to perform a routine check. The facility, a sprawling complex of rusting tanks and weed-choked concrete, had been decommissioned years ago, a relic of Oakdale's industrial past. Only a skeleton crew remained for basic maintenance and security. As Sanderson made his rounds, a foul odor caught his attention near Tank 17, a massive cylindrical structure standing some 40 feet tall. The stench, reminiscent of rotting meat, grew stronger as he approached. At 7:32 a.m., Sanderson radioed his supervisor, reporting a potential dead animal in the tank. Upon closer inspection, Sanderson noticed that the access hatch to Tank 17 was slightly ajar, its heavy padlock hanging uselessly from the latch. Using his flashlight to peer inside, Sanderson made a discovery that would haunt him for years to come. There, curled in an unnatural position at the bottom of the tank, lay a body. The advanced state of decomposition made immediate identification impossible, but Sanderson could make out the tattered remains of what looked like a high school baseball jersey. Most disturbing were the legs, bent at impossible angles, the knees seemingly shattered beyond recognition. At 7:41 a.m., Sanderson made a second call to his supervisor, this time requesting immediate police presence. Detective Megan Wright of the Oakdale Police Department arrived on the scene at 8:17 a.m. A 10-year veteran of the force, Wright had seen her fair share of gruesome crime scenes, but the sight that greeted her in Tank 17 was enough to turn even her stomach. The victim was male, estimated to be in his late teens. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, consistent with having been in the tank for several months. The most striking injuries were to the knees, which appeared to have been systematically destroyed by a blunt object. A significant head wound was also noted, though it was unclear at this stage whether this was the cause of death or a result of the fall into the tank. By 9:05 a.m., the crime scene was fully secured, and the process of evidence collection had begun. As news of the discovery spread, a crowd began to gather at the perimeter of the facility. Among them were Tom and Amy Harris, parents of Richard Harris, the 18-year-old baseball prodigy who had vanished without a trace on September 15, 2023. The Harris family had last seen Richard on that fateful September evening. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Richard had told his mother he was heading to the local library for a study session with friends. When he failed to return home by 10 p.m. and wasn't answering his cell phone, Amy Harris began to worry. By midnight, with still no word from Richard, Tom and Amy contacted the Oakdale Police Department. What followed was the most extensive search in Oakdale's history. Over the next few weeks, police officers, volunteers, and even a specialized K-9 unit combed every inch of the town and surrounding areas. Richard's face was plastered on posters, billboards, and news broadcasts across the state. But as days turned into weeks with no sign of the missing teenager, hope began to fade. Now, standing behind the police tape on that cold Christmas morning, the Harrises clung to each other, their worst fears seemingly confirmed. By 2:30 p.m., the body had been carefully removed from the tank and transported to the county morgue for autopsy. Preliminary examination by the medical examiner, Dr. Elena Hill, confirmed what many had already suspected: the victim was indeed Richard Harris. The autopsy, conducted on December 26, 2023, painted a grim picture of Richard's final moments. Both kneecaps had been completely shattered, the surrounding tissue pulverized. The injuries were consistent with multiple blows from a heavy, blunt object, possibly a baseball bat. Dr. Hill noted in her report that the precision and viciousness of the knee injuries suggested a deliberate attempt to cripple rather than kill. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head. A single massive impact on the right parietal bone had caused a depressed skull fracture and subsequent fatal brain hemorrhage. Interestingly, Dr. Hill noted that the head injury appeared to be somewhat inconsistent with the methodical nature of the knee injuries. She hypothesized that after Richard's knees were shattered, he likely fell and struck his head on a hard surface, possibly the edge of the storage tank itself. Toxicology reports came back negative for drugs and alcohol. Time of death was estimated to be within hours of Richard's disappearance on September 15, 2023. As news of Richard's identification spread through Oakdale, the town was plunged into mourning. Richard had been a local celebrity, the star pitcher for the Oakdale High Cougars with a fastball that could clock in at a blistering 95 miles per hour. Scouts from major league teams had been regular fixtures at Oakdale High's games, all vying for Richard's attention. But Richard was more than just a talented athlete. He was an honor roll student, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and still found time to help his father with the family construction business on weekends. To many in Oakdale, Richard Harris represented all that was good about their town: hardworking, kind-hearted, and destined for greatness. On December 28, 2023, Detective Wright held a press conference outside the Oakdale Police Department. She confirmed Richard's identity and urged anyone with information about his disappearance or death to come forward. Wright emphasized that no detail was too small, that even seemingly insignificant information could be the key to cracking the case. As the investigation intensified, Wright and her team began the painstaking process of re-examining every lead, every alibi, and every piece of evidence from the original missing person case. One of the first people Wright re-interviewed was Jake Collins, Richard's longtime rival on the baseball diamond. Jake, a talented player in his own right, had always lived in Richard's shadow. With Richard gone, Jake had become Oakdale High's star athlete, set to receive the coveted college tuition grant that had once seemed destined for Richard. On January 3, 2024, Jake was brought in for questioning. His alibi for the night of September 15, 2023 was weak. He claimed to have been at home playing video games alone in his room. His parents, both working night shifts, couldn't corroborate his story. Jake appeared nervous during questioning, his hands fidgeting and his eyes darting around the room. But was this the guilt of a killer, or simply the natural anxiety of a teenager being questioned about his rival's murder? Wright decided to dig deeper into Jake's background. She interviewed his teachers, coaches, and classmates, building a comprehensive profile of the young athlete. What emerged was a picture of a driven, competitive individual who had always felt overshadowed by Richard's success. Several classmates reported hearing Jake make bitter comments about Richard's talents, with one recalling Jake saying, "If Harris wasn't around, I'd be the one getting all the attention." However, as Wright delved further into Jake's movements on the night of September 15, 2023, his alibi began to strengthen. Security footage from a neighbor's house showed Jake's car in the driveway all night, and his online gaming account showed activity during the hours Richard went missing. While Jake remained a person of interest, Wright began to look elsewhere for her prime suspect. Next on Wright's list was Frank Mulligan, the former business partner of Richard's father, Tom Harris. Mulligan had been forced out of Harris Construction in a controversial move just weeks before Richard's disappearance. Several employees had reported hearing Mulligan vow to make Tom pay for the betrayal. Wright interviewed Mulligan on January 5, 2024. Unlike Jake, Mulligan had a solid alibi for the night of September 15, 2023. He had been at a business dinner in the next town over, confirmed by multiple witnesses. Still, Wright couldn't shake the feeling that Mulligan might be involved somehow. Could he have hired someone to do his dirty work? To explore this angle, Wright began an exhaustive investigation into Mulligan's finances. She combed through bank records, credit card statements, and even interviewed Mulligan's associates. If he had hired a hitman, there would be a money trail. But after weeks of digging, no suspicious transactions were found. Mulligan's alibi held up, and Wright was forced to look elsewhere for answers. As January wore on, Wright found herself no closer to solving the case. Each lead seemed to raise more questions than answers. The pressure from the community and her superiors was mounting. Oakdale, once known for its low crime rate and tight-knit community, was now making national headlines for all the wrong reasons. On January 17, 2024, Emily Foster, who lived across the street from the Harris family, came forward with an observation that would change the course of the investigation. Foster reported that on the night of Richard's disappearance, she had seen Bob Johnson, the Harris family's next-door neighbor, driving away from his house around 8 p.m., which was unusual for the typically homebound accountant. Wright pulled up Johnson's file, expecting to find a thin dossier on an unremarkable neighbor. Instead, she was surprised by the wealth of positive information. Bob Johnson, 45, had lived next to the Harris family for over a decade. He worked as a senior accountant at a respected local firm and was known throughout Oakdale for his volunteer work and community involvement. Bob had served as treasurer for the Oakdale Little League for 8 years, helped organize the annual town fair, and was an active member of the local Rotary Club. His wife, Linda, was best friends with Amy Harris, Richard's mother, and the two families had been close for years. Every person Wright interviewed had nothing but praise for Bob Johnson. He was described as kind, generous, and always willing to lend a helping hand. Several neighbors recounted how Bob had helped them with tax questions free of charge, or how he had organized meal trains for families going through tough times. The idea that Bob Johnson could be involved in Richard's disappearance seemed almost laughable, and yet Wright's instincts told her to dig deeper. She began a careful examination of Bob's background, looking for any inconsistencies or hidden secrets. What she found was a man who seemed almost too good to be true. Bob had a spotless record, no criminal history, not even a parking ticket. His financials were in perfect order with no unexplained transactions or hidden accounts. He was, by all accounts, a pillar of the community. On January 20th, 2024, Wright obtained a warrant to search the Johnson residence based primarily on Emily Foster's statement about Bob's unusual departure on the night of Richard's disappearance. What they found there was far from what anyone expected. The house was immaculate, reflecting the Johnsons' reputation for orderliness. But in Bob's home office, hidden behind a false panel in his desk drawer, detectives discovered a small, leather-bound journal. The journal contained entries dating back several months, filled with cryptic notes and increasingly agitated writing. One entry, dated September 10th, 2023, stood out. "Can't believe what I found. The betrayal, the lies, it's all falling apart. Have to do something." Subsequent entries were equally vague, but hinted at a growing desperation. "Followed Elle again. Same place, same time. This can't go on. Decided. It ends now. No more baseball dreams, no more affair." The final entry, dated September 15th, 2023, the day of Richard's disappearance, was particularly chilling. "It's done, God forgive me." The diary, while suspicious, provided no concrete evidence of Bob's involvement in Richard's disappearance. However, it was enough for Wright to bring Bob in for questioning. On January 22nd, 2024, Bob Johnson sat across from Detective Wright in the interrogation room. The man before her bore little resemblance to the upstanding citizen described in his file. Bob looked haggard, his eyes red-rimmed, and his usually well-groomed appearance disheveled. For hours, Bob maintained his innocence, insisting that he had been at home on the night of Richard's disappearance. But when confronted with the diary entries and Emily Foster's statement, he finally broke down. Bob's confession, when it came, was as shocking as it was heartbreaking. He recounted how, on September 8th, 2023, he had accidentally discovered an incriminating text message on his wife Linda's iPad, which was synced to her iPhone. The message from Richard Harris read, "My parents are not at home. Hurry up, babe." Suspicious, Bob had checked the location history on Linda's phone. He was shocked to discover that she had visited the Harris household 4 times in the past week, often when Tom and Amy Harris were known to be out. The revelation had shattered Bob's world. Linda, his wife of 20 years, was having an affair with Richard Harris, a boy young enough to be their son. The respected accountant and community leader found himself consumed by jealousy and rage. Bob told Wright that he hadn't planned to kill Richard. His intention, misguided as it was, had been to confront the boy and put an end to the affair by breaking Richard's knees, effectively ruining his promising baseball career. On September 15th, 2023, Bob had followed Richard after school. He tracked the teenager to a secluded area near the old fuel storage facility on the outskirts of town. Armed with a tire iron from his car, Bob had confronted Richard. In the ensuing confrontation, Bob struck out at Richard's knees, shattering them with several brutal blows. But then, in a tragic turn of events, the injured Richard had tried to crawl away, losing his balance and falling. He struck his head on the sharp edge of one of the storage tanks, the impact killing him instantly. Panicked and ashamed, Bob had hidden Richard's body in one of the empty tanks, hoping it would never be found. He had disposed of the tire iron in a dumpster several towns over and had lived with the guilt of his actions ever since. "I never meant for him to die," Bob said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to end the affair, to save my marriage, but it all went so wrong, so quickly." The confession sent shockwaves through the Oakdale Police Department. Bob Johnson, the man everyone thought they knew, had been harboring dark secrets and violent jealousy beneath his genial exterior. The community would struggle to reconcile the Bob they thought they knew with the man capable of such a heinous act. On February 5th, 2024, Bob Johnson was formally charged with the murder of Richard Harris. Despite the unintentional nature of Richard's death, the premeditated attack that led to it ensured that Bob would face severe consequences. Linda Johnson, while not directly involved in Richard's death, faced charges related to her inappropriate relationship with a minor. The trial of Bob Johnson began on June 10th, 2024 and lasted for 3 weeks. Johnson's defense team attempted to argue that the death was accidental, but the jury wasn't convinced. On July 3, 2024, Bob Johnson was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Linda Johnson, in a separate trial, pleaded guilty to charges of sexual misconduct with a minor and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The Harris family, devastated by the loss of their son and the betrayal of those they had considered friends, retreated from public life. Tom Harris sold his construction business, and the family moved away from Oakdale, unable to bear the constant reminders of their tragedy. The old fuel storage facility, once a forgotten relic of Oakdale's past, became a grim monument to the town's darkest chapter. Despite calls to demolish it, the town council ultimately decided to leave it standing, a cautionary tale of the dangers that can lurk in even the most seemingly perfect communities. For the people of Oakdale, life would never be quite the same. The illusion of safety, of knowing one's neighbors, had been irrevocably shattered. As they moved forward, they carried with them the memory of Richard Harris, the boy with the golden arm and the bright future whose dreams were cut tragically short. In the end, the case of Richard Harris served as a haunting reminder that darkness can take root anywhere, even in the sunniest of small towns. It was a tale of jealousy, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of hidden desires. As Oakdale struggled to heal, the question remained, how well do we really know those around us? And what other secrets might be hiding behind the picket fences and friendly smiles of America's small towns? The tragedy of Richard Harris would long be remembered, not just in Oakdale, but in true crime circles across the nation.